9. Tyra's story. In late May, Daniel went home from college for the summer. His friend Tyra stayed on campus, said she was going to look for a summer job. Daniel's parents lived in Fairfax, where his old high school girlfriend Inez lived. Inez was Daniel's first love. It was hard for him to drive by the Clifton Road Cineplex and the bookstore where they used to spend time together. Sundays were the worst, because then Daniel had to go to church at St. Mary's of the Sacred Heart. It was where he used to go with Inez. Now he would go, but all he could think about was how she never visited him, how she never called. They were broken up, but they were supposed to have stayed friends. But they didn't. Tyra called at least once a week. Tyra was the only person from school that remembered Daniel's birthday on June 29th. Daniel had met Tyra at school. Met her at Mass, actually. She was a Eucharistic minister. She was impossibly beautiful, with auburn hair and curves that made Daniel hurt inside. She liked him, too. She said he was sweet and smart, not like most of the guys that she knew. Daniel was sure he was in love again. They started to hang out regularly. Daniel would have said they were dating. But then one day, when he asked Tyra to be his steady girlfriend, she said, "Daniel, you're a really nice guy, but I have to be honest with you. If we were dating, I'd still be fucking other men." It wasn't the response he expected. Shortly after that, Daniel had started to figure things out. All the guys that said hi to Tyra on campus, the men that would recognize her at bars when she came in with him, she had slept with most of them or their friends. "I take my freedom very seriously," she said. "I knew I should tell you, but you were so nice and so good. I thought you'd stop being my friend." They could be friends, Daniel decided. Not girlfriend and boyfriend, but friends. Then came the second blow. Tyra stopped going to church. She said she didn't believe in God anymore. "We have to forgive people even if they don't say sorry? God forgives us only if we do say sorry. Double standard," she said. "But God loves us," Daniel said. "Why create all these people just to love you, just to worship you? God's an egoist." "We have a choice. And we're punished if we don't choose him. We go to hell, right?" Daniel couldn't argue with her. He couldn't even date her now either. She was an atheist. He prayed for her. Every day, not just on Sundays. Although on Sundays he would pray for Inez too. The summer wore on. Daniel worked his job as a waiter during the day, saving money for tuition and school books. Most of his friends had not come home for the summer, so at night he read books that he picked up at the used bookstore. Classics like The Brothers Karamazov, Ulysses, Things Fall Apart, and The Bluest Eye. One Sunday morning at Sacred Heart, he saw a girl that looked like Inez, sitting up front where he and Inez used to sit. He walked up behind her, but it was not Inez. It was some teenage girl, way too young, with braces. She smiled at him. He smiled back, but sat on the other side of the church. One time, at the coffee and donuts reception after Mass, the priest saw Daniel sitting on a radiator, talking to some high school girls who wanted advice on college admissions essays. When the girls had gone, the priest said, "Whatever happened to that lovely young lady from Bolivia I always used to see you with? She dumped me." Daniel couldn't keep from adding, "She's dating someone else now." Daniel felt an awkward pause coming. It arrived, with all its eyes to the floor, feet-shuffling glory. The priest stared out the window. Daniel got up and said he had to go to the men's room. Tyra called just as Daniel was dreading the approach of the 4th of July and all the picnics he would have to attend, alone. Tyra said that her dad still wasn't sober, had lost his job, and now there was no way to pay for school. She'd have to get a job. Actually, she already got one. She was dancing. "Dancing?" Daniel said into the phone. "Exotic dancing," she said. "Exotic dancing? God, Daniel, you're so innocent." "I'm a stripper," Oh, it's gonna put me through school, Daniel. I guess you need to do that. I went to church the other day. You serious? I didn't burst into flames. That's great. That's really great, Tyra. It was September. Daniel was glad to be back at school. While he was headed to the cafeteria one evening, he saw Tyra talking to a tall blonde guy with big shoulders, a strong jaw, and a flat stomach. Whoever he was wearing pleated khakis, an Oxford shirt that showed off his biceps, and expensive sunglasses. Tyra was standing in pumps, blue skirt, and a pink-fitted t-shirt. She had his attention. She had the attention of every male who walked by. Daniel was going to keep walking. He didn't want to be introduced to the blonde guy, but Tyra saw him. Daniel! Tyra jumped up and hugged him, hanging on his neck, her heels curled up so that her pumps touched her backside. He hugged her around the waist. The other guy was watching. She waved goodbye to him over Daniel's shoulder, and he left looking miffed. Daniel, it's so good to see you. I missed you, she said. I missed you too. Thanks for remembering my birthday. Everyone always forgets it. In the summer. No problem. Hey, we can celebrate it this weekend. Or we can do a half-birthday party in January. That would be nice, he said. His cheeks felt hot as they walked along the quad, and she put her hand in the crook of his arm. The trees were just starting to turn yellow, and the brisk breeze sent a rain of them down around them. When you going to come and see me dance? A strand of hair swept into her lips. Jeez, I wouldn't know what to do in there, Tyra. What is strip bar etiquette? You've never been to a titty bar? Daniel, you are such a gentleman. You just come in, sit down wherever you want, ask the waitress to change a 20 into 1 so you can tip the girls, then you watch. You make a lot of money? Men are stupid. They'll fork it over. He couldn't help but notice the note of derision in her voice. Daniel procrastinated. He dated other girls, but things never worked out. He took one girl out, but she only talked about her ex-boyfriend. Another girl deserted him at a restaurant when some of her friends came by and asked her to go clubbing with them. One girl, Tammy, whom he helped with her history paper, offered to take him out to a nice restaurant to thank him. She did. When the bill came, however, she claimed to have forgotten her purse and asked him if he would mind covering it. One night he was home alone and the phone rang. It was Tyra. It's a slow night, she said. You want to come and keep me company? Sure. Okay. Daniel rode his bike up Wisconsin Avenue to where Tyra worked. The club was next door to a Blockbuster video store. Imagine that, he thought. Mothers bringing their kids from soccer practice, t-ball games, and Christmas pageants to pick up movies from the kiddie section, and just a brick wall separates them from topless women. He locked his bike up beneath a street lamp, just a block away from the club. The sidewalk was bordered by a stone wall with an iron gate. On the other side was the Episcopal Cemetery. Beyond that, the cathedral. Daniel contemplated the cathedral. The stone, hoisted up to impossible heights and mortared into permanence, was beautiful, breathtaking. He thought of grace, beauty, and transcendence. He thought of being with Inez. She could be breathtaking at times, but other times she had been a pain, sort of full of herself, mean even. Maybe he was lucky to be rid of her. Although a part of him wondered if any girl would ever love him again, or even like him. But Tyra liked him. It was good to have friends. One time, Tyra had shown up at Daniel's dorm room after drinking at a party, and she had tried to kiss him. He turned his head away. He wanted to be special. Everyone made out with Tyra, and a lot of people fucked her. Daniel decided he would be the exception by not making out. He would be special. It was the opposite of Inez. She had had high standards. Even after dating all that time, they had never had sex. He was Inez's first kiss. Guys in high school had hated Daniel because he dated Inez. Because he got somewhere with her. Inez had tolerated him removing her bra, but never her panties, nor his boxers. Plus, they never touched each other there with their hands. Instead, they would grind against one another until they climaxed. Never too many times in one night, or else Inez would become reticent and ashamed. Daniel had loved her all the more for it. He was still a virgin and was happy for it. "Your virginity is a gift from God," she used to say to him, "only to be shared with one you commit yourself for life." He had agreed, but the rumors that had reached him said that Inez was indeed fucking the new guy she was dating. It made Daniel wonder what had been wrong with him. He walked up the hill and tried to focus on Tyra. The rules were different with her. He would stand out with Tyra by not getting anywhere with her on purpose. That would be how he would make sure their friendship was special. He walked down the sidewalk, past empty office buildings, past a Chinese takeout joint. At the door to the strip club, there was a cement rise, a step before the door. It wasn't quite high enough to be a real step, but it seemed to be trying. In its effort, it was more of a hazard than anything else, not high enough to be helpful, not low enough to be negligible. Just there, enough to warrant a red sign on the door with gold letters that read, "Watch your step." Daniel went inside and saw another door, this one with a sign that said, "No cover charge." He pushed it open. A large bouncer dressed in black asked for his ID. Daniel gave it to him. He looked at it with a frown. "This really you?" "Yeah." Of course it was. Daniel didn't own a fake ID. It was a profile shot. He asked Daniel to turn sideways. As Daniel did, he saw the length of the bar. 3 stages, 3 girls, dancing, twisting, topless, and bottomless. Men sat in chairs across the aisle or at the foot of the stages, facing the girls, paying the girls. Full nudity? Tyra hadn't said it was full nudity. Titty bar. Titty bar meant tits. But here were vulvas, shaved, pink, and stretched open for display. A man went up to the stage and dropped down a $1 bill. The dancer raised her leg above her head and her labia yawned open. $1. Just $1 to see all that. Daniel didn't know what stage Tyra used. She'd said they danced in 15-minute shifts. He sat in the second row, definitely not the first, in front of the center stage. There was a mirror behind each dancer, a mirror with letters that said, "Do not touch dancers." These were not good-looking guys. They were average guys. Very average. A quiet, short one with a duffel bag. 2 chubby guys in college sweatshirts. A very fat man in a suit. A man in his 40s, with spiked hair on top and hair down to the base of his neck and back, wearing a nylon jacket and sweatpants cut off at the knee. 2 men, brothers perhaps, with cardigan sweaters and cinnamon frosty beards and thick professional glasses. Daniel thought he saw one handsome young man with good build and good hair, but when he turned, Daniel realized he had buck teeth and a grotesque goatee. Daniel was the most attractive guy there. A feeling he wasn't used to. The others were men who would never see a beautiful girl naked unless they paid. And the women were beautiful. Amazing, really. All of them. But Daniel only picked out 2 he would consider attractive. He had long ago realized the difference between attractive and beautiful. It was all about approachability. He had learned that Inez had been beautiful, but over time realized she was not attractive. He wanted to consider himself a man of discriminating taste. Whereas he knew all the men there would take any one of the girls they could get. He knew, from hearing people talk about strip bars, that every man there wanted to leave with a dancer, go home with the dancer, have sex with a dancer. He didn't. He told himself that this quality made him different. But the dancers didn't know that. He wanted them to. He wanted them to know that if he tipped them, it was because he knew they had to pay rent, and he wanted to help them pay it, not fuck them. Then Tyra appeared. She walked down the aisle between the seating section and the stages. Every man turned to watch her go past. She was in black lingerie and a silver robe, a red Chinese dragon swirling around it. When she saw Daniel, she ran over and hugged him. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, sitting down next to him. "Nice robe." "Thank you. I got it at Commander Salamander." "You have the nicest outfit here. It's really classy." "Thank you." A waitress asked them for drink orders. Tyra introduced Daniel as a very special friend. He supposed it was their own code for something. The waitress winked at him and said his drinks would be free. He asked for a vodka tonic with 2 limes. It was what Daniel's older friend, Sidney, always ordered. Tyra had a Sprite. When the waitress left, he said, "She seemed nice." "She's the only one," Tyra said. They talked about dancers, how they couldn't be trusted, how they let guys think they had a chance just to get tips. Tyra emphasized that none of the guys there had a chance. "If the first time you met me, I was here," Daniel said, "we wouldn't be friends. But you wouldn't come here, Daniel. It's why I love you." Daniel looked around at the girls, the reflections of the girls, the men staring at the girls, staring at Tyra, staring at him. "No, I probably wouldn't." The men watched her, even with her clothes on. She was the best-looking dancer there. She had hugged him, kissed him. The men must have wanted to tear him apart with their envy, tear him apart and find out what he had done to warrant the affection of a stripper. Tear him apart or lift him to their shoulders in triumph, because his victory was their victory. She said that strippers were fucked up. They all had to be the center of attention. They had sexual dysfunctions. They had to have male approval. They had been molested when they were younger. It was like chaos theory, Daniel said. The theory that a butterfly's wings flailing in Africa could make it rain in San Francisco. An uncle or father's hand grazing a thigh at 5 landed them straddling a brass pole at 18. "Daniel, are you a little tipsy?" Tyra asked, smiling. "I don't know," he said. He'd never had a vodka tonic before, but he did notice he was talking a lot. "How many of these poor girls have been molested?" "Most of them." "All of them?" "Not you." "God, no. Dad's a drunk, but not a pervert. I'm here to pay tuition. I was going to quit after the first month, but it's not like Pop is going to come through on my rent. It's up to me." Tyra was wearing dark red lipstick. She looked dangerous. She lit a cigarette. A stream of gray from her mouth became a cloud of gray that touched the ceiling and the colored lights. And when it dissolved, there was a naked girl dancing in a mirror. Daniel stared at her for a while and lost track of the time. "Earth to Daniel," Tyra said. "Sorry. Hey, I'm glad you went to church the other day." "Yeah, God pisses me off sometimes." The statement made him cringe. He took a sip of his drink, the way people sip drinks when they're uncomfortable. He repositioned himself on his chair. "Well, I'm sure we give him a real run for his money." He wasn't sure what he meant. Tyra didn't seem to care one way or another. She was looking at one of the girls. "She does great pole work." Smoke came out with her words. "I don't know. There are some things about Jesus, though, that I find beautiful. I can't let go of those." "So you still like Jesus?" Daniel said. His drink was empty. The waitress brought him another. "I find him beautiful," Tyra said, sipping her Sprite. "That's why I wanted to be a Eucharistic minister, so I could hold his body in my hands. He wouldn't care that I'm a stripper. He hung out with prostitutes, adulterers, and tax collectors, for God's sake." It was something. Jesus was God. Did Tyra know that? Of course she did. She was a good Catholic girl. The bouncer walked by, a big guy with a bald head. He might have seemed friendly in any other situation, but now he was just ominous. Tyra reached out and touched him on his massive hand. He stopped. "Rodney, this is my friend Daniel. He's a very good friend." They shook hands. Rodney's enveloping Daniel's. "Sorry I gave you a hard time at the door. Won't happen again," he said. "No problem." Daniel said, trying to pitch his voice low to match Rodney's. It really was no problem. At least now it wasn't. He was just so relieved that Tyra still believed in Jesus. It was Tyra's turn to dance. The music never stopped. It was fed from somewhere else, not in tune with the comings and goings of acts. Not that the guys cared much. The dancer in center stage wound down her dance. She slipped on a dress that still showed her labia when she bent over. Tyra ascended. She pulled a roll of paper towels and a bottle of Windex from the side of the stage. She sprayed the mirror. Shots of Windex looked like giant gobs of spittle. She wiped the mirror. She wiped the poles with an up and down motion. She put the Windex and roll away, then spun around, her robe flaring out like an inverted flower. She was dancing with a vibrancy in her muscles and intimacy in her eyes that the other dancers lacked. The robe shimmered. It tantalized. It mesmerized. It was gone. Now she was a woman of dreams, in lacy black panties and with firm breasts. The perfect form from a lingerie ad. That was not real. That was a construction of a photography studio and airbrushing. Yet it was real, right there before all of them. Her skin was a perfect, unblemished amber under the red lights. Cigarette smoke was being blown her way by anxious lungs. The drinks the waitress had served Daniel had helped him to relax. He felt permeable, in a moment so removed from the present distractions that his thoughts were lucid. He realized this was why people went to hell. But this was different. He had come for Tyra out of friendship. He knew he was special because he wasn't trying to get anywhere. He wasn't objectifying. If anything, he was romanticizing. And after all, Tyra still believed in Jesus. She was just doing this to pay bills. That somehow made her more beautiful than all the other girls. Her skin was smooth, her hands running over it. Her hand moved over her panties, over her belly button, up her chest, and the bra snapped away. There were her breasts. They had always been there, but now he was finally seeing them. Then her panties fell down, and her 6-inch heels stepped out of them. It wasn't that much of a shock to see her completely naked. Daniel had already seen the other naked dancers' vulvas. Tyra's wasn't that different. It was just anatomy, after all. She wrapped dollar bills around her fingers like rings. She raised her legs slowly, above a man's head, as if imitating a dog urinating. The man playing the role of a gratified fire hydrant. He turned away happy. 3 men went up at once, placing 10s, not 1s, on the stage. They turned away, laughing, giggling. The young man with a good build but ugly face went up. He turned away amazed, leaving 3 20s behind. Tyra would reach down for the money slowly, looking at her patron and mouthing the word, "Thank you," accompanied by an intimate gaze, as if they were the only ones in on it. The men loved it. They whooped, hollered, and cheered. Tyra looked at Daniel. He was looking in her eyes. She smiled. He knew everyone in the audience was now watching him, or aware of her eyes on him. She slid down the mirror, her hair collecting behind her, her knees bending, her thighs spreading into a wide V. Then something unexpected. She blushed. It was all over her, in her face, the skin of her breasts, her lower back. Daniel shifted. They both were uncomfortable. He didn't want to hurt her feelings by looking away, or maybe she realized halfway down into her crouch that she didn't want him to look, but it was too late. She came up too quickly. Her movements were out of sync with the music. A man in a bruised blue suit sat down beside Daniel. He had a cigarette smoldering in his mouth and a martini glass filled with brown liquid. He reached out his hand. "Guido." "Hi. Daniel. Nice to meet you," Guido said. Tyra's Sprite was still beside Daniel's vodka tonic. Daniel was not sure how many he had drunk. Both drinks were sweating and turning the paper napkins beneath them into dark red pulp. "Is she your friend?" Guido said, gesturing with his martini hand towards Tyra. Yes. She is very beautiful. I think so. You think so or you wouldn't be her friend, right? Daniel laughed, because he felt he should, but he knew he was Tyra's friend for reasons that were not as superficial as that. Guido was looking at him, waiting for him to say something. The stare was making Daniel nervous. Maybe he needed another drink. Guido had one single eyebrow across the wide expanse of his forehead, and a bristly mustache that was a smaller copy of the eyebrow. He would be a hairy old man, Daniel thought. Guido's eyes were slag gray, his hair close-cropped on the sides. On top it was longer. It looked gelled. It had to be gelled. It's more than that, Daniel said. Of course, that's why anyone has friends. It's more than that. Yes. They looked at her, but now Daniel felt self-conscious, as if Guido was watching him watch her. Tyra's back was to them, a back nimble like an archer's bow, mounted on mounds of flesh, parted in a crescent moon. What's her name? Guido said. Ambrosia, Daniel said. It was her stage name. Of course, Tyra never revealed her real name at work. He didn't like the name. It rolled off the tongue awkwardly. Of course it did. It was Greek. Here's my card, Guido said. Daniel looked at the card without reading it, not understanding why he now had it. Maybe you can introduce us, Guido said. Yeah, you can introduce yourself. I'm sure she'll come around. But when Tyra came back around after her set, she pointed towards some empty chairs in the back of the bar. She didn't want to sit around customers. Daniel shirked his shoulders at Guido as he got up. From the back, Daniel and Tyra evaluated the strippers, picked out the fake breasts, talked about high heels. Tyra pointed out the girl who did the best pole work again. All the time, Guido kept looking back over his shoulder. Daniel noticed this because Guido's was the only head not turned towards the stage. That guy gives me the creeps, Tyra said. He gave me his card. His name is Guido. Figures. Daniel stayed late. Guido stayed late. He kept ordering drinks. Guido had to. Daniel did not. The waitresses were friendly to him and didn't enforce the you sit, you sip rule on him. The other dancers walked by and smiled at him like he was an insider. At 2 a.m., Tyra was off. Another dancer would take her place in the schedule. She disappeared upstairs, then reappeared, her body concealed under a white turtleneck and black jeans. Daniel followed Tyra to the exit. The aisles got crowded with the shift change. Girls in robes were climbing up to the stages while others were leaving, their duffel bags slung over their shoulders. Daniel tried to stay close to Tyra. He saw Guido getting up out of the corner of his eye. Yo, Daniel, Guido said, leaning on the back of a chair. Daniel walked. The music was loud. He pretended he didn't hear Guido. He was leaving with a dancer. Of course people wanted to call his name, wanted to chant it. He couldn't help smiling at the thought. He hooked his finger through Tyra's belt loop. She looked back at him and smiled. It was just right, he thought. Rodney wished them good night, shook hands with Daniel. Daniel felt like he was part of a club, almost felt like he was leaving a family reunion. The air outside was cold and refreshing after the hot clouds of cigarette smoke. They turned down the street. Daniel decided he would walk her to her car. Then he heard Rodney, in his voice of authority, his voice of confrontation. Hey, you can't go out with that. Daniel turned to see Guido. He was coming out the door of the club. He had sideburns of sweat. He was drunk. In his hand was the object of incrimination, the martini glass still filled with brown liquor. He felt Tyra squeeze his arm, press her body against the length of his. It thrilled him. Rodney held Guido by the sleeve of the bruised blue jacket. The padded shoulders lifted up and looked weird and unnatural. Guido was determined. They could see it in his face. Daniel and Tyra were frozen in place. They'd never turn their backs on a face like that. Guido pulled his arm out of the jacket, the shoulder pad deflated. Rodney lost the grip. Now there was something in Guido's hand. Now he was turning. Now, whatever it was, some weapon, some blunt object, perhaps just a garage door opener or a cell phone, or even a blackjack. Whatever it was, he was hammering it down on Rodney's face. Rodney fell back, his arms retracting to his nose, a fountain of blood the color of wine issuing forth. Then the second calamity. Guido stepped. His foot landed half on the little non-negligible step, half off. Underneath Rodney's cries, there was a scuffing noise that was Guido's foot losing traction on the cement. The foot went, twisted clumsily, and his body tipped, suspended in a way that was beautiful and graceful and imminently painful. "Oh, fuck," Guido said. He burped the words, saying them half-heartedly as he concentrated on swinging his arms. His hand reached up high. Daniel watched it fall. Down, down, the cathedral appeared behind it, the stone lit blue and gray by ground lights. A plane flew behind one of the spires like a tracking star. The hand came down towards a parking meter. The bruised blue jacket was just touching the ground. The hand passed the parking meter, then the elbow. Followed by the bang. Guido's head jerked back as it hit the meter, which didn't care if a living or inanimate thing collided with it. It stood fast regardless. The martini glass rolled out of his hand and broke in a spreading fan of glass. The music was still playing. Rodney was holding his nose. A red and black crevasse yawned where the top of his nose had been opened. Someone inside felt a draft because the door was left ajar. When they came out, they saw the scene and called the police. Once they had made a statement to the police, Daniel and Tyra left. She drove them home. Daniel would come back and get his bike later. Tyra had her own studio apartment now. The couch was a fold-out bed. Daniel told her to wash up. He would make the bed for her. She hugged him. "Thank you, Danny. I don't know what I would do without you." She closed the door to the bathroom. He pulled out the bed, fluffed the pillows, tucked the sheets under the mattress. Good and tight. He finished. She was still in the bathroom. Girls took a long time. He sat down on the bed since the couch was now gone. He wanted to watch TV, but she didn't have one. So he listened to her. There were sounds of water running, drawers opening, closing, a bottle clinking on the sink top. She brushed her teeth. She spat. Water ran. The door opened. She walked over wearing a pink Winnie the Pooh onesie. Pooh was smiling on the front, oblivious to the breasts behind his ears. She laid down with her head on Daniel's lap. "Going to get under the covers?" he asked. "Okay." He tucked the blankets around her and rubbed her feet to warm them. She squirmed. "That tickles." "Sorry." He leaned on his elbows beside her. He ran his fingers through her hair and over her scalp, drawing the locks out on the pillow. That night she had come over to his dorm room drunk. The same night he would not kiss her, she had slept on his couch. She asked him that night, "If you won't sleep with me, Daniel, then just run your fingers through my hair, like my mom used to. It comforts me." He did then. He did it again now. She smiled. Her lips were their natural color now, pink. He smelled of smoke. She turned on her side. She was a landscape to him. Her hair on the pillow, a river delta. Her shoulders, a precipice leading down to the valley carved out at her waist, followed by the rise of her hip, then the gradual slope down her legs to the wasteland of the bed that was not her. He realized he had not run his hands along a girl's body since Inez. He did so, letting his hand linger in the hollow of her waist before ascending to the peak of her hip, riding in the air back to her hair to repeat the whole journey again. He wanted her. He wanted her close to him, like she was when Guido first came towards them, when she had turned to him for safety, for protection. He wanted her body against him, that warm softness beneath him. He was trembling. "You cold, Daniel?" "Yeah." More minutes bred and died. Nothing happened. He ran his fingers through her hair again. It was straight now. All the tangles were gone. He curled it away from her ear, wrapping it under the lobe. He saw the little hole where her earring punctured her body. He kissed it, then kissed her head right behind her ear. He felt her body shift, her legs straightened out. It was her cheek that moved itself under his lips. He pressed his lips to her again, and it was her mouth. It tasted of toothpaste and cold water. She was soft, softer than him, but solid, full, and real. All he knew was Tyra. He heard the sound of the onesie unzipping. She unbuttoned his shirt and jeans. Her softness was bare and pressed close beneath him. Then it was rubbing against him. Then it was moving in cadence with him. It was all around him. He was inside her. Daniel was fucking Tyra. Blocks away, Rodney was bleeding underneath fluorescent ER lights. A needle was being forced under the skin of his face to inject lidocaine, another in his arm for a blood transfusion. Guido was on another floor, restrained as he slid into an MRI machine to scan for cerebral hemorrhage. Afterwards, he would be detained by the police. They would charge him with assault and battery and carrying a blackjack as a concealed weapon. All this because Tyra still believed in Jesus.